federal jury reached a $243 million verdict against Tesla for the role its Autopilot played in a fatal car collision. That number wasn't just compensation, it was punishment. It was something called punitive damages. It was the jury sending a message very loudly and very clearly to Tesla and every other automaker out there. If you market your driver-assisted technology in a way that implies it can be more than it actually is, and then that technology doesn't live up to the hype, you could be liable. My name is Shaunak. I've been a plaintiff's litigator for almost 10 years. That means I represent people, usually against big corporations or government entities, including in motor vehicle collisions like this one. The smoking gun in this case, like in many of these cases, was the data. Cars are rolling data centers, and not just tech-heavy Teslas. In the 70s, GM was putting sensors in cars to record airbag deployments. In the 2000s, GM was putting event data recorders, black boxes, into every car to record telemetry, 5 seconds of pre-collision data. Today, virtually every car records that pre-crash data. Speed, throttle, which is how far the accelerator was pushed down, braking, steering, and they also record actual crash data, the moment of impact. They record delta V, the change in velocity at the moment of impact. That can tell you how severe the crash actually was. They can tell you the direction that the impact happened in, where the car was moving, or how the car was facing when it happened. They can record airbag deployment, seating position of the passengers. All that information goes into this event data recorder, this black box. The black box data is intended for accident reconstruction, for investigators to determine how something went wrong and what happened. But there's also a ton of other information that modern cars take in that can be used to reconstruct what exactly happened in an accident. GPS can give a ton of context to that black box data about speed and position. You've got cameras inside of cars that you may not even know about that insurers use to determine what your premium should be because they monitor driver attention and driver behavior. You've got cameras outside of the car for parking assist and turn assist, and in some cases driver-assisted driving. You've got sensors as well, LiDAR, ultrasonic sensors. You've got all kinds of tech in modern cars, and in addition to the black box data, all of the inputs that this tech takes in can also be used to reconstruct what happens in an accident. But you can't just give a spreadsheet of data to 9 people and tell them to interpret that data and apply it to the case without any kind of understanding of what that data means or how it should be interpreted. And that is where expert witnesses come in. Accident reconstruction experts talk about speed, direction, forces involved. Biomechanical experts talk about how those impact forces actually affect human bodies. Forensic animators take all of that data and all of that expert interpretation and put it in a format the jury can understand. The data tells the jury what happened, but the video or the animation that the forensic animators create puts the jury right at the scene while it's happening in real time. There is no situation where you could possibly have every single piece of data required to create a 100% accurate video of what exactly happened. You've got to make assumptions, and experts are very good at making reasonable assumptions, and their assumptions are tested in depositions and on cross-examination by the opposing attorneys and by opposing experts. Usually, in cases like this, there are experts for each side that interpret the data and tell slightly different stories to the jury, usually differing on presumptions or assumptions they're making and interpretations of data that could go either way. Now, in the Tesla case and in a lot of motor vehicle collisions, it's not just about what happened. It's about why the driver, why a person acted or reacted in the way they did, especially in a case where you're trying to hold this company, the manufacturer, liable. You're trying to show that it wasn't just the driver at fault, that the driver did something, relied on some way, some system, in a way that was totally foreseeable and reasonable because of them being human beings, and the manufacturer should have anticipated that and corrected for that before it happened. Basically, what was argued in this case was that the driver of this Tesla got distracted on his cell phone, blew into a parked car that had a couple stargazing, and killed one of them, injured the other. Why is Tesla liable? This is where human factors experts come in. How do people interact with things in the real world? Because it's one thing to say this is how things should be on paper, and an entirely different thing to actually experience these systems in the real world. People get overly comfortable operating a machine that handles the boring things really well. They get complacent. They start to tune out alerts or warnings that may come in, whether it's chimes or little moves of the steering wheel. So how does a distracted driver's over-reliance on autopilot turn into liability for Tesla? This is called products liability. The manufacturer of a product can be held liable for harm caused by the product. Usually this happens if there is a design defect where the product as designed is just unreasonably dangerous, or if there is a failure to warn, where there are harms or risks associated with using the product, and there weren't adequate warnings on the product. But both of these usually have to do with the consumer using the product in the way the product was intended to be used. So how could Tesla be liable in a case where they argued the driver wasn't using autopilot correctly because the driver wasn't paying attention? This is a doctrine called foreseeable misuse. The law doesn't just allow you to design products for perfect users. The law understands that in the real world, there are patterns of use. There are ways that people will use products. Even if they're not exactly how the manufacturer intended them to be used, they are foreseeable because the way humans interact in the real world with these products. And a manufacturer should foresee and warn for or protect for these types of misuses by consumers. Deadman switches on dangerous power tools, lid interlocks that prevent you from opening a pressure cooker if it's fully pressurized, switches that make it so you can't turn the microwave on if the door is cracked open, opaque packaging for laundry detergent pods, which without them would look very, very colorful and big like a giant gummy bear, and a child might open the packaging and eat it. These are all ways manufacturers work to prevent foreseeable misuse. They know that even though you're not supposed to be using those products in this way, you're not supposed to be turning the microwave on when the door's open, you're not supposed to be opening your pressure cooker when it's fully pressurized, they know people are going to do it. In fact, they know it's so likely people are going to do it, they need to take steps to protect against it. Tesla says you need to have your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel when you're using autopilot. But is it foreseeable that people are going to misuse that people are going to become complacent with the autopilot and not be paying attention to the road? Now add to that the way Tesla and Elon Musk were talking about autopilot in 2018, 2019. Even the name autopilot, the vibe was near autonomous. So if the manufacturer, if the design of that doesn't match near autonomous, if it's not actually near autonomous, if the driver needs to be paying more attention because the system isn't going to catch and prevent all collisions, then the warnings and even the inbuilt system triggers need to match that. They need to prevent for foreseeable human misuse. Now, $243 million, like I said, wasn't all compensatory. So a big piece of the story is also punitive damages, punishment damages. These are a type of damages a jury can award for conduct that goes way beyond just negligence, for conduct that is reckless or oppressive or malicious, or conduct that is so far beyond the reasonable bounds of what society expects that it is deserving of punishment, of a message. And that's what the jury did here. $200 million of that verdict were for punitive damages against Tesla. What moves the needle for a jury towards that level of conduct? Well, a lot of times it can be knowledge. Did the company know about this? Did the company know and willfully not take steps that it also knew it needed to take to prevent these incidents? Was there a pattern? Were there internal testings and memos? Were there safety features contemplated but ultimately not put into place because the company believed it would hurt messaging, even though it knew that there was harm that would likely occur? These are all things a jury will consider in determining whether or not a manufacturer is liable for punitive damages. Now, I can't tell you what exactly happened in that room. No one can except the members of the jury who were there. But these are some of the things people think about and talk about when they're considering whether to award punitive damages. I think the takeaway from this case isn't just limited to car manufacturers. Obviously, it means that manufacturers are going to have to be keeping a closer eye on the safety guardrails they're putting into place with driver-assisted technology and the warnings and the education that they're putting out there. Otherwise, they very much risk liability, and we as pedestrians and drivers on the road risk injury. But more than that, we look at the automation of everything. We look at AI and the way folks are outsourcing cognitive load to AI, having it do more and more things, the mundane things that we would normally do. In professional fields like medicine and the law, it's something that is a very real danger, and people are using and misusing AI technology because they don't have a very clear understanding of what it can and can't do. That, to me, is very foreseeable misuse, especially right now when it is constantly changing in terms of reliability and accuracy. So it's really important that as we move deeper into automation, not just mechanical automation, but cognitive automation, we are bearing in mind that the over-reliance on this automation is going to result in foreseeable misuse of these technologies, and that is going to result in real harm. That's important for the users, for us to know in using the technology, and it's also important for the manufacturers to know so that they can put into place appropriate guardrails. Because if they're not motivated to do it for consumer desire or consumer protection, they sure as heck are going to be motivated to do it because of potential liability. There you go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, check out my other videos, and I'll see you next time.